In this video, we'll create a flat, responsive Bootstrap website from scratch. Okay guys, so let's take a look at this really colorful, flat Bootstrap website design before we get started laying out the website with our HTML and CSS. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have our website logo, followed by the Bootstrap navigation on the right-hand side. And when we click on one of the navigation links, it's going to send us to a particular spot on the page. So we can scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, all the way up to the top, or anywhere in between. Let's take a minute to scroll through the website and look at the various sections we'll be laying out. So at the top here, we have this desktop landing page image, and then when we scroll down underneath it, it's going to maintain the same color as the bottom of that image, where we have a welcome section and some heading titles along with the paragraph on the left, this code image on the right, and then a quote underneath. So once we scroll down underneath that, it will lead us to the features section, where we have this banner image going from the light blue shade down to the orange fade, where it says get to know our features, and then we have some HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap icons along with another heading section underneath that, followed by another image separating the colors here from orange to turquoise, with a portfolio section where you can add your own pictures, and then at the bottom here we have a connect section that we can scroll to using the navigation that'll link us to our social media pages. While we're laying out the website, we're going to be using a number of different Bootstrap tags for our column widths that will eventually flex down into this single width mobile version of the website with its responsiveness. And then when we click on the mobile navigation, it'll still send us to the relative space on the screen that we designate in our HTML. So I'm going to flex it back up to full width here, and then let's take a final look at the mobile version for how it's going to appear on an iPhone 8 here, where it's going to scroll us down to the bottom, and then we can go back up to the top, and then I'll let you know what we need to get started with the tutorial. If you're new to my channel, please remember to like the video, subscribe, and turn on your notifications if you enjoy the lesson. Alright, so in the description of this video will be the flat Bootstrap website starter files that you see here. Take a second to pause the video if you need to download them real quick, and then we can go over them. So what I'm going to have open to work on this tutorial will be index.html and style.css. So I'm going to be using the free program called Sublime Text, which you can get from sublimetext.com. And then I'm also going to have index.html open in Google Chrome as my web browser while we're developing the website. So we'll go over the rest of the files in there in just a second. Let's take a look at what's already included for us in index.html and style.css. Okay, so from the top of index.html we have our HTML doc type itself. Then we have the title of the website here, flat responsive Bootstrap website tutorial, followed by our character set, the standard UTF-8. Then we have our viewport with device with initial scale 1 for mobile websites, followed by our Bootstrap CSS file, and then we have our jQuery file with the latest version of jQuery, and then we have our Bootstrap file here with bootstrap min.js, and then we have our Font Awesome file. So Font Awesome will let us create these icons that we're seeing at the bottom of the website for our social media pages. Then what we have here is scrolling.js, which is in our starter files. That's a small script that will allow us to scroll to different sections of the website. And then we have underneath that our style.css sheet, which we have open here also in Sublime Text. And then the last thing that we have inside of the head of our website is a simple JavaScript script that will allow the Bootstrap navigation to close once we click on one of the navigation links for the mobile version, as we see here. Then lastly, from our flat Bootstrap website starter files here, we have the image folder, img, that contains all of the images necessary to complete the website tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead and put the starter files to the side. We may reference them later in the tutorial for the image extensions. Alright, so let's go ahead and drop down to our body section of the index.html document. I'm going to make sure I have it linked to Google Chrome here with some simple text, and we can get started with our first tag. The first thing that we'll lay out will be our navigation up here, which is the blue bar spanning the entire page, which has the light blue border underneath it. Okay, so we're going to reference that with an HTML5 nav tag, and then we're going to give it a class of navbar, and then navbar dash inverse and navbar dash fixed dash top. So we're telling Bootstrap that we want the navbar or navigation to stay fixed at the top of our web page. And then you can drop down and close out the nav tag. So I'm going to be using HTML comments here that are invisible on the page to note when certain sections end. So for this one we'll have end of nav, and now let's add our container. So div class container dash fluid, and then I'm going to drop down and close out the div and then create a quick comment saying this is the end of our container. So end of container. And then I'm going to add another div class here with div class navbar header, and then close out the div. And let's create a comment here and say end of navbar header. Okay. And now if we refresh the page, we'll just have a black line up here, which is the start of our navigation bar and header. And now let's go ahead and add the button, which allows us to have the drop-down nav on mobile versions. So button type button, and then we'll give it a class and say navbar toggle, since this is sort of the toggle switch for our drop-down navigation, and then data-toggle equals collapse, and then data dash target equals hashtag my, and then capital N in nav bar. Okay, so that's going to be the button for toggling our collapsible nav bar. Alright, so now if we refresh, we have the start of a button up here. And what we'll do next is add the 3 lines here for sort of the burger menu or icon with our span classes. So we'll write span class icon dash bar, and then I'm just going to copy this and paste it 2 times over for each of the burger lines that we have. Now if we refresh, there we have our burger menu looking pretty close to the finished version already. So let's add our logo to the left-hand side now, so you can drop down underneath the button tag and we'll create an A class. So A class navbar dash brand, and then href, and I'm just going to do a hashtag here to keep the link on the same page. You can link to a different URL or the same web page if you want. And then image source, img, since we're in the image folder. So img/logo.png. And then we'll need to close out our link or a tag. Okay, so now we'll have our logo added to our navigation header, and later we'll center it and change the color. For now, let's go ahead and add our unordered list after referencing the collapsible nav bar here. So I'm going to say div class collapse space navbar dash collapse, and then ID my, and then again capital N and navbar. Now let's start laying out our navigation links, starting with the unordered list, which will contain the links. So we're going to give this unordered list a class and say ul class navbar dash nav, and then navbar dash right, since we want it to appear on the right side of the screen when it's at full width for the desktop version. Okay, so now let's take a look here. So as you can see, it's displaying off to the right hand side as opposed to the left. Alright, so let's drop down and add our list items. Okay, so li and then ahref, and our first link is home. So I'm going to write home in here in between the a tag. So let's take a quick look at the navigation here. And if we select the drop down button, we have the home link. Okay, so there we have our home link. So the next thing that we're going to do is, as you know, when we click on a navigation link, it's going to link us to a certain section of the page. So in order to tell it to get to that section of the page, what we're going to do is have our link be hashtag home, and then later we're going to reference this home link in the content of our website so it sends it directly to that section of the page. Alright, so let's add our next link. So this is liahref, and this will be for the about section of the page. So hashtag about, and then you can write about in between the a tags. And then our next one, liahref, hashtag features, and then I'll write features here. Okay, and then liahref portfolio for the portfolio section. All right, and then our last one for the social media section, liahref hashtag connect, and then I'll write connect here in between the a tags. Okay. So the one thing that I forgot to do is just close out the div class for the navbar collapse class there, and I'm going to create a comment here saying this is the end of navbar collapse. Alright, so now let's go over to the version we're working on here in Google Chrome and check out our navigation. Okay, so there we have all of our navigation links included in the drop-down menu. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to add will be the banner image at the top of the website, which has the desktop and the blue background. So let's drop down underneath our navigation. I'm going to leave a space here in between the main sections of the website, and let's reference the home section. All right, so let's say div ID and then home, And our home navigation link will link us here. So there we have home, and since it's an ID, we'll use the hashtag there. And now let's add the banner image. So image source, and then img/desktop.png, and then I'm also going to give this a class that we can reference in the CSS later and just call it class banner. Alright, so now if we go back to Google Chrome and refresh, here we have our great big banner image, which later we'll have it only span full screen or stay within 100% of the screen as we see here. So the next thing that we'll do is drop down to the About section of the website. So let's again reference the About section from our navigation, so div ID About, and then we'll give it a class and say container-fluid, and then text-center, so Bootstrap will center all the text here in this section. And then I'm going to create a comment here saying this is the end of the container. Okay. So now if we click the About link, it's going to try to bring us down below the image there, but we don't have the content to do it just yet. So let's go ahead and add our heading one here at the top where it says, "Welcome to my website." So I'm going to be copying and pasting some of the text here to speed up the tutorial some. You can type out the same stuff or put dummy text or type out whatever you like here. Then underneath the heading 1 tag we'll have a heading 3 where it says, "Let me show you how to create a fantastic looking flat website using Bootstrap along with some HTML, CSS, and JS, or HTML and CSS snippets rather." So here we have our heading info at the bottom of the page centered for us already. And I'm going to create a little bit of a space here at the bottom so we can see it. You don't have to add these break tags if you don't want. Okay, so next we'll create a row. So this is going to be a 2-column section where we'll have the left section paragraph text, and then the right section will be the code image. First, let's create a line break, or actually 2, to separate our heading 3 from the row underneath. So break, and then div class row, which will contain our Bootstrap columns. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the div, and then I'm going to create a quick comment here in HTML saying this is the end of our row. Okay, so what we're going to do first is use a Bootstrap class called col-md-6. So Bootstrap contains 12 different columns, so 6 will take up half of the page. And then when we get to 768 pixels, it's going to turn into 1 column. Okay, so now that we have our paragraph info in there, let's drop down underneath this div class and create another div class col-md for 768 pixels or medium, and then 6 for another half section of the page. And let's reference the code image. So image source img/code.png. Okay, and let's save it and take a look at what we have so far. So we'll have 2 sections already laid out for us with Bootstrap here, and if we use the About link at the top, it'll bring us to the "Welcome to my website" text, or heading 1. Now let's drop down and add this quote here, which is a heading 3 tag, but first let's create a little bit of space between that and the row with another break tag here. Okay, and then we can add H3, and it's going to be in italics, so I'll use the I tag here, and then I'm just going to paste in the quote. Okay. So now if we refresh, there we have the "This is the best website course ever" quote from J. Johnston. Moving on down the page, let's add the next banner image, which goes from the light blue to the orange shade. So that's going to be charts.png. So we don't need to wrap this with an ID since we'll link to the features section after this. So we'll just add it with an image source tag with img/charts.png, and then we'll give it the class banner similar to the banner image that we added before. Okay, so now we can drop down to the features section. And similar to home and about us, we're going to start off the features section with the div ID so we can link to that part of the page. So div ID features, and then we're going to give this a class of container-fluid and text-center. Then I'll drop down and close out the ID. Now let's create a comment saying this is the end of the container. And then what we can do is add the first part of the features section, which is the heading 2. So it says get to know our features. Alright, so I'm going to add the h2 tag and then paste in get to know our features. And then what we'll do is drop down and we're going to create a Bootstrap row to contain all 3 columns here. Okay, so drop down underneath heading 2 and we'll say div class row, and then I'm going to close out the div and say this is the end of the row. And then what we'll do is create 3 different Bootstrap columns. So if we divide 12 by 3, we get 4. So col md-4. So if we flex the website at 992 pixels with MD, I think I said 768 earlier, it's actually 992. So let's change it to small for 768 here. So SM4 at 768 pixels, it's going to go from 3 columns to 1 column. Next, let's reference the icon here, which is in our images. So image source img/html5.png, and then we're going to give it an ID and call it icon, so we can make it a different size for the mobile version later in the CSS. And then underneath it, of course, we have a heading 3 where it says HTML5. So these 3 columns where we have the icons followed by the heading 3 will be basically the same. So to speed up the tutorial a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and copy the div class col sm4 and paste it twice. And then what we can do is simply change HTML5 to Bootstrap in this case, as well as the heading 3 here. And then the third one will be CSS3.png. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh and take a look at our icons and the heading underneath them here in the finished version in Google Chrome. Okay, so moving down the page, the next thing that we'll add will be our heading 3 heading here. So let's drop down underneath the last div class col sm4 and we'll add another heading 3. Okay, so h3, and then I'll just paste this text in here. So now if we refresh, there we have our centered heading 3 text underneath the icons and their respective heading 3s. Alright, so moving down the page, let's add the people.png banner image next. So we can drop down underneath the last container for the features section and say image source img/people.png, and then we'll give it a class and say banner. Alright, and then I'll create a little bit of space here. And if we refresh, there we have the people banner image. All right. Okay. So now let's drop down to our portfolio section. So we're actually going to style this a little bit differently from the version that we're seeing here. As you can see, when we get down to 768 pixels, it changes to only 3 portfolio images, but what we're going to do is actually change it to 992. So we'll get to that in just a second. First, let's add the div ID portfolio, and then we'll give it a class of container-fluid and then text center to center our text. Okay, and then close out the div ID and class with end of container as our comment. Okay. And now let's go ahead and create the heading 2 where it says check out our portfolio. And I'm going to leave 2 breaks underneath it to create some space in between that and our portfolio images. And now let's start with the first, or rather the only row, and then we'll add our comments. So the row will contain all 6 images, which will have 6 column classes. Okay, so div class row and then end of row for our comment. Okay, and then div class col-md-4. Then drop down and close out your div class, and then let's add the image source tag. So I'm not going to add the image extension yet because we'll be copying and pasting this a couple times, but we want to give this an ID, the same as our HTML, Bootstrap, and CSS icons with ID icon. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this col-md-4. All right, and then in order to get the images from our portfolio to be hidden on small screens, because we only want 3 of them to display on small screens, as you can see here. And actually, let's make it so it is 768 pixels. So we'll add an additional class here with hidden-sm for small screens. And then I'll go ahead and copy this and paste it twice over. So the last 3 images that we add will be hidden when we get down to 768 pixels rather than 992. Okay, so now we can go ahead and add the icons. So this is going to be in an additional folder to the image folder. So we'll have img/icons/ and then the image extension. So we'll start with camera.png, and then we have icons/mic.png, and then we have the phone next, followed by the calendar, and then we have the TV and the clock last. So icons/TV and then icons/clock. Okay, so now let's refresh and take a look at it here in Google Chrome. Okay, so if we use the link to go down to the portfolio section, here we have all of our portfolio images. Then when we get to 992 pixels, we have it appearing with only the 3 icons. So next, let's add our connect section here. So let's drop down and add the banner image with image source, and then this will be social.png. So img/social.png, and then let's give this the banner class. All right. So now let's take a look at it in the version we're working on in Google Chrome here. So here we have our social banner image. And now let's go and create the last section that we'll link to using our navigation, which is the connect section. So div ID connect, and then we'll give it its class. So class container dash fluid, and then text dash center. And this is optional, but I'm actually going to use the footer HTML5 tag since this is the very last section. Okay, so I'm going to close out the footer, and inside of here we'll add our div class row. So drop down and close out your div. Then I'll have a comment here saying this is the end of the row, and the closing footer tag is the end of the container. Okay, so let's add our heading 2, which is connect, and then drop down and we'll create a div class and call it social, which will include our font awesome icons. Okay, so close that out. And what we're going to do is we're going to wrap our icons with an A link tag, so ahref. And I'm going to leave this blank for now. And then we'll say target underscore blank. So when people click on our social icons, it will link them to a new page. So our website will stay open. And then we're going to reference our font awesome icons with I classes. Okay, so go ahead and copy that, and let's paste it 4 times, or 3 times rather, for each icon, and then we'll fill in the blanks with our links and the reference to the particular icon that we're using. So I'm just going to take my links from this page here. The first one is Facebook, then we have Twitter, and then Instagram, and lastly we have YouTube. So you can put your links in at ahref. Here we have the social icons before we give them any style. I'm going to go ahead and just copy my own links here and paste them into the A tag. Alright, so I have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then YouTube. Okay. Alright, so now if I go over here to the version we're working on, there we have all of our social icons created, and if we click on them, they'll link us to each one of our social pages. So that's everything for our HTML. Now what we can do is move over to style.css, where we'll lay out all of our styles for our flat Bootstrap website. The first thing that we'll notice once we open up style.css is this import URL for a Google font. So if you want to add your own custom Google font in, just do a simple search for it and you can add any font you want. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to style will be the body section of the website. So I'm going to go up to the top of the page, in the finished version and the version we're working on. So let's go ahead and reference the body and then open and close your swirly brackets, and let's add our Google font here with font family Doses, and then our fallback font is sans serif. Okay, and then let's go take a look at the change that it made. So that's going to change all of our text throughout the entire website to the Doses font that we're seeing here. And let's give our font a size of 200%, and then we'll give it the color white using the hex value FFF. And then let's also give it a text shadow of 1 pixel horizontal, 1 vertical, and 1 pixel of shadow, and then 666 is the hex value for a gray color. Okay, so now we have our text shadow with our white text, and then it's going to show up much better once we add the colorful background. So let's move down and start to style our navbar next. So we'll reference it with .navbar for the navbar class, and let's give it its background color with the hex value 297FB8. Okay, so now if we refresh, there we have the blue navigation, which is the same color as the banner image beneath it. Alright, let's add the border bottom with that light blue hex value. So 1 pixel solid, 5398C6. Okay, so now let's refresh, and it's going to change our line there to blue. Okay, moving on, let's add some padding. So we'll go with 1% top bottom, 0 left right. And that added some padding up to the top here, but our navigation unordered list isn't displaying correctly. So let's go over to index.html and see what's wrong. Okay, so it looks like I forgot a hyphen here in navbar header. So make sure you have that. And if we refresh, that should solve our navigation issue. Okay, so there we have it. And now let's drop down to navbar brand, which is the class where we style our logo and add our logo in the HTML. So .navbar-brand, and we'll give it a minimum height of 55 pixels. And then let's also add padding to kind of center the logo. So we'll do padding 0 top, 15 pixels right, and 5 pixels bottom. So the 15 pixels right, that should keep the navigation list items from getting too close to our logo. Okay, so that looks good. And now let's drop down to our list items. So navbar-nav li. And what we'll want to do is add some padding to the right of our list items so they're not too close to one another. So padding right 20 pixels, and that's going to space them out nicely like the finished version here. Alright, so now let's give them their color. So we'll want to reference the A link. So we'll need to get to it from navbar inverse, so .navbar-inverse, and then .navbar-nav lia, and then color white, or FFF. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . Okay, and then refresh, and there we have our white navigation links. So the next thing that we'll do is let's add the hover effect to our navigation that we see here with the same color as the blue underneath the navigation header. Okay, so you can paste the same selector from above. We'll just add a hover to it and then change this to background color, and then let's change the hex value to 5398C6 that we have up here. Okay, so now if we refresh, there we have our hover style over the navigation. And it's going to take effect with the drop-down navigation already also. Okay, so there we have it. So the next thing that we'll do is let's add a little bit of space beneath the logo when we drop down. As you can see, the logo is kind of sitting right on top of the border bottom there. So let's add .navbar-header padding bottom 5 pixels. And that's going to space it out good for us. Okay. And let's change the border color now. So we'll change this border to the same as the light blue shade. So .navbar-inverse .navbar-collapse, and then comma .navbar-inverse .navbar-form. And then border color, and that's going to be the same hex value, 5398C6. Alright, okay, so there we have it. So we could have added the class for the border around our drop-down button to that, but let's do it separately. So navbar-inverse, and then .navbar-toggle, and then we'll give it the same border color. So border color, the hex value of 5398C6. Alright, now if we refresh, there we have it looking just like the original until we hover over it. So let's change that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy from this and paste it in here. So we have navbar-inverse .navbar-toggle, and we're going to have the first one as hover and the second as focus. Okay, and then we'll have the background color the same as the hex value above, 5398C6. Okay, so now let's check out our button. And there we have it. Alright. And since we have the script for closing the navigation as well as the scroll script already in there for us, it's going to bring us down to the section of the page that we referenced in the HTML. So now let's style our banner images. So we have the top one, this one, the people one, and then the connect one. And we can make them all fit into the screen with one simple style here. So we'll reference it with img.banner because we have the banner class inside of the image tag. So img.banner, and then we'll give it a width of 100%. Okay, so now if we refresh, there we have our first banner image as well as the rest of them displaying at 100% of the page. Alright, so as we look around in the version we're working here on, we'll find that we'll need some padding above and possibly below some of the banner images, but we'll do that later on. Let's move on down the page and style our headings next. So the first thing that we'll style will be our heading 1, then we'll have heading 2 afterwards, followed by heading 3, and then we have our paragraph text after that. Alright, so for our heading 1, we really only have one here on the website, and that's the welcome to my website text that we see here. Okay, so let's change the font size to 300%, which is about 3 times 16 pixels in Google Chrome. And then we'll give it a font weight of 800, and then refresh. And let's make our text shadow a little more pronounced. Instead of 1 pixel, let's have our text shadow at 2 pixel, 2 pixel, 2 pixel, and then we'll keep with the gray hex value. Alright, so let's refresh, and we have it looking just like the original here. Okay, so now on to our heading 2s. The first one is get to know our features, and let's change the font size to 210%. Okay, and that's going to affect a couple of other heading 2s below. Next we have our heading 3s, and let's change the font size for them to 150%. Okay, and then if we refresh, we have it looking somewhat like the original. Let's go ahead and give it a max width though. So we'll give it a max width of 80% of the page. Okay, and then let's center it with margin 0 auto. Okay, so that looks good, and then let's do our paragraph text here. Alright, so we'll have our paragraph text at a font size of 120%. Okay. And right now it's even with the top of the image, or a little bit above. So let's add some padding to the top of our paragraph section. So we'll give it a padding of 6% all around, or you can just do padding top if you want it to stay as wide as it was. Alright. Okay, so it's looking pretty good here as far as all of our headings and the text go. So one other thing I want to do, just to make sure, let's center our images. Alright, so we'll reference them with IMG and then margin 0 auto to center them. Okay. Alright, so now let's drop down and let's reference our icons next. So if you remember, when we added these images in the HTML, we added an icon class. So here, for example, with HTML5.png, we have actually ID icon. So we'll do hashtag icon since it's an ID rather than a class, and then we'll give it a max width of 200 pixels. And then let's give it a margin to create a little bit of space here between it and the text as well as above. We'll give it a margin of 1% top bottom and then auto left right. Alright. Looking pretty good. So the next thing that we'll do is let's drop down to the bottom of the page and style our social icons. Alright, so let's reference those with the social class, so .social, and then we'll give them a font size of 500%. And then if we refresh, there we have them, and they're displaying in these blue link shades. And then let's add some padding. So social A for the links, and padding 3% all around. And then let's also give them the color white. Alright, so if we refresh, we're not really going to be able to see them now because they have the white background. So let's add a hover color to them with .social A : hover. And let's give them a hex value of D5, 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 which is sort of a light gray shade. Okay, so now when we hover over them, we can at least see them before we add the background color to the connect section down here. So let's move on up top and let's take care of some padding and add our background colors. So the first thing that we'll add padding to will be our home ID right here. So the home ID is what the desktop image is nested within. And then we have about, features, portfolio, and connect at the bottom. So let's go ahead and reference all of these in our CSS so we can add the background color and any padding that we might need to the top or bottom of the sections. Okay, so starting with the home ID, let's give it a padding of 60 on the top. So padding top 60 pixels. You may need a little bit more for really wide screens, but 60 pixels should be pretty good here. Alright, so that pushes it down some so we can see all of the lamp up there. Alright, now let's drop down to our about section. So hashtag about for the ID, and then let's give it a padding of 70 pixels top bottom and 0 pixels left right. Okay, so if we refresh, there we have a good amount of space. And then let's give it the blue background color. So background color, hashtag 1FB8EB for the light blue shade. Alright, then if we refresh, there we have it. And it's flush with the desktop image above. Alright, next is our features section, so hashtag features, and then let's give it a padding of 70 pixels top to create some space between the image above and then the heading 2, and then we'll give it a padding of 50 pixels on the bottom. Alright. So now let's add our background color for the orange shade, which is FF9800. Okay. And then for the portfolio section, let's add the same padding, so padding 70 pixels on the top, 0 on the right, and then 50 pixels on the bottom, with the background color as that turquoise shade. So background color, hex value of 00B2CA. Okay, looking pretty good. And now let's do our connect section. So pound or hashtag connect, and let's give it a padding of 0 top, 0 right, and 12% bottom. Or we could have just done padding bottom 12%. So that's going to create some space underneath our social icons. And let's give it its purple background color with the hex value 673 rather, AB7. Okay, so there we have it, looking pretty good. Alright, so all of the spacing looks good except for this heading 3 section right here. So let's check that out in our HTML, and we might need to just move around some break tags or add some. Okay, so let's add the end of our row to the top of our heading 3 here. And let's add 2 break tags above our H3. Okay, so that looks much better. Alright, so that's everything for the full width version of our website. It looks almost identical to the original version here. The next thing that we'll do is add a few media queries. So we've got a little bit of space off to the right here. So let's take care of that. So in Bootstrap, if you have that, make sure that you have 0 margin on your row. So .row margin 0, because I think that Bootstrap inherently gives a margin of 15 pixels or negative 15 pixels rather to the rows. So let's go ahead and add a media query, and we'll let's actually check out our portfolio section real quick, sorry, before we add the media query. And let's change this to, or let's rather, what we're going to do is we're going to add hidden XS for extra small. So these columns are also hidden on extra small screens. Sorry, I missed that when we were laying out our HTML. Okay, so now if we refresh, we'll just have the 3 icons displaying at the extra small width. Okay, so let's go back over to style.css and drop down, and we'll create a little media query here. So at media, and then in parentheses, max width 768 pixels. And let's change the size for the font size of some headings in the paragraph to start. So H1, let's change our font size to 170% from 300%. And then let's change our heading 2 text to a font size of 160% from 210. Okay. And our heading 3, let's change that to 120% from 150. And also, let's make it a little bit wider. So rather than having it 80%, let's say max width 90%. Okay, so that looks better. And let's move down to our paragraph text. So we'll reference that with P. And let's change the padding to 3% on the top instead of 6%. And then we'll give it a font size of 100% from 120%. All right. So moving down the page, let's make this code image smaller. So if you remember in our HTML, we gave this an ID of code, which we can reference here. So if we scroll up, here we have our code image. Oh no, we didn't add it, so let's do that now. Okay, so ID code. So image hashtag code, and then we'll give this a max width of 160 pixels. Alright, so that looks much better here for the mobile version. And moving down, the next thing that we'll resize is, so there's a lot of space underneath the banner image up there at the top. You can mess with that if you want. Let's change the icon size for the images as well as our HTML, Bootstrap, CSS icons here. All right. So we'll reference that first with the column SM4. So .col -SM-4 and then the hashtag icon. So .col SM for small 4 icon, and let's give it a max width of 110 pixels. Alright. Okay, so that looks much better here. Okay, and then let's move down to our portfolio images and resize these. So that's going to be col MD4 icon rather than SM4. And again, we could have styled this in the same line there, but let's go ahead and separate them to MD4. Alright, so there we have our icons a little smaller, and let's space them out a little bit here with padding bottom 8%. Okay, so that looks better. And lastly, let's resize our social icons here. So we'll reference that with the social class, and let's give them a font size of 200% from 500%. Alright, so that does it. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of some of this extra space in style.css and index.html. And then let's take a look at the final version here with our social icons changed there. And we have our drop-down menu sending us to all the different sections of the page. Alright, so that does it. As I said, I want to thank you for sticking around with me through this Bootstrap tutorial. If you enjoyed the tutorial, please do like the video, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. Then I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.